Hi, I'm Jessica Fenton. I'm here again with Slim Stevens. The last time we were together, you mentioned your inner camp counselor. Is he with you here today?
Oh, the inner camp counselor. Yes. He's very happy today. But he can't figure out why I'm happy. My inner camp counselor is the guy that says, it's okay, you're going to be all right. And he's better than that. He also says, that impulse you had, honor that impulse. It was probably yourself trying to tell you something. Or give me little sayings to keep going. And in my inner camp counselor scenario, I'm maybe 7 or 9. So the camp counselor is looking out for me, telling me not to worry, and fighting off the meanies. And he's sort of the one that feeds me the lines like, is worry a choice? You know, a lot of times I know I'd rather worry. You know, I fight that off pretty good. If I have an issue, I try to grab it right away, because it's grabbing that issues right away is so much better than festering. And so that's one of the things my camp counselor says to me. Also, he's the guy that takes my shadow self out and has a talking to him when my shadow self is trying to mess me up. I know the last time we were talking, I was talking about, I think he was a 4th grader. The 4th grader was the one whose parents are shouting, yelling in the kitchen, and he can see them and he can hear them. And I would go halfway up the stairs and peer through the what are they called, balusters? Anyway, these things. And I'd be listening, too scared to go up because I didn't want to listen, but too scared to go down and not get involved, or to get involved. So the shadow self is the guy, my therapist, God bless her, Nancy, used to say, whose voice is that? Like when I'd say something self-criticizing. And I remember talking about it the other day when there was a guy, my assistant campaign manager, who was working for me, and we were videoing a reception where I was talking, and there was a camera in back that had been running, and it showed him making fun of me and talking me down, and right there on the video. And so that to me is a good example of the shadow self, who's like inside of me, who's pushing me down. And so when I find him sort of lurking in the curtains in my brain, I sort of have the inner camp counselor to go and talk to him. I know we were talking, last time you were talking about whether there's a mean person in you that says, are you an indie artist or a pop artist or something like that? And that reminded me of that. So yes, my inner camp counselor's here right now. If you say something mean to me, he's right here.
Noted.
And my inner camp counselor probably likes your inner camp counselor, so.
I'm assuming I have one. So is this related to the Slim Stevens Secrets of Happiness?
Yeah, it's a Slim Stevens Secret of Happiness is hear the silent tapes. So in that sense, you need to make sure, I mean, one of the bad things about the shadow self is he hides. He says it's not me. So you have to call him out, smoke him out. Well, let's say lure him out.
Okay. So how is your song, The Ring, related to The Road by Cormac McCarthy?
Oh, okay. Yeah, the last time we were interviewing, we looked at The Ring. That is his song called The Ring. It's so funny. I saw that they made a whole movie of that book. A major studio did. And they never even figured out what it was about, The Road. The Road by Cormac McCarthy is about divorce. And it's all one huge allegory. And Hollywood didn't even know it. They thought it was about Road Warrior or something. So I thought that was pretty funny. In that sense, the Ring and the Road are very similar because they're trying to evoke that powerlessness. The Road is such a beautiful book, the way the man loves his son so much and does anything he can to protect him. Beautiful book.
So you were about to read us your dog dream last time when we ran out of tape.
Oh,
so
yeah, okay. Yep, I still got it.
You still got it? Okay.
You ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
The dog is up against me, and she will knock me down and kill me. She is toying with my knee because she knows exactly the spot to pressure point me down and tear at my arteries. I try to stay calm and focused on the activity in front. I am too scared to try to deal directly with the dog. Her teeth are around parts of me, and I can feel exactly where they will tear into me. So, this is where you say, Dr. Stevens, any thoughts? Well, I think my inner camp counselor will say it. Mr. Stevens, Dr. Stevens, any thoughts? Well, yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good fear dream. Scared of a female who's going to hurt. And I'm too scared to try to deal directly with the dog. I try to stay calm and focused on the activity in front. So that's my dog dream.
Okay. Well, I mean, I can't think of a better introduction than for the scientific method.
Oh, we're going to watch the scientific method?
Yeah, we're going to watch that.
All right.
We were watching the news on her little TV. She said, "Can loving you reduce my misery?" Her dog ran in and started growling at me. I said, "Doesn't he have somewhere else important to be?" She said, "He loves meeting people, and isn't he sweet?" I said, "Unless you're people that he doesn't love to meet." Such pretty teeth. Why don't he count his fleas? The senator was saying, "I'm so happy to say that we got rid of all the cameras at the CIA, where insomniacs are pampered for as long as they stay, and their drinks are poured 1,000 times a day. And General, I hope and pray you'll keep dropping bombs until they see it our way. Show 'em we don't play. In the USA, we clapped our hands and took the dog for a walk. He chased the repo man to the end of the block. He tried to start a family with a collie dog. He stole the mailman's bag and bit 2 cops. She said, "He's so very playful, I'd hate to make him stop." I said, "If that's playful, I'd hate to see pissed off." He does get a little cross, but he's so furry and soft. She said, "I'm a scientist of high regard." I said, "Then give me a quiz so you can tell if I'm smart." She said, "If we begin to kiss and we're feeling the spark, can you calculate the risk if we come apart?" I said, "This experiment works best in the dark." But when I reached for the light, the dog began to bark. Don't you have a yard or a Saint Bernard that he could guard? She said, "It's dinner time, so light the candles, please." Then she served him some wine and macaroni and cheese and some barbecued beef and cauliflower and peas. I said, "Any chance that I could get something to eat?" She said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, here's a doggy treat." I said, "You know my friend Adam got an apple from Eve. Don't be naive, said, let's take a bubble bath and make it hot. So I jumped in the tub and said, guess what I brought? She said, you better move over before you get caught. It'll hurt his feelings if you're in his spot. I played with a little boat, they played with his yacht. He got a shampoo, I did not. Maybe you forgot, his fur had a knot. You like to play dress up, I do presume. Then close your eyes and wait in my room. She sang, here comes the bride, and I started to swoon. I cried, me too, and none too soon. I opened my eyes, there already was a groom. His leash was silver, his tuxedo maroon. Where's your honeymoon? Have you thought of Cancun? You can dig on a dune. So bad and I don't know why. She said there's something in my bag that we can try. She wrapped his shot collar around me tight. She said I'll push this little button that says sit, don't bite. I said my teeth are jiggling, but I feel alright. Now find the button that says spend the night and hold me tight. You look pretty in white. I'll take a seat if I might.
So, Miss Fenton, did you ever write a song to one of your dogs?
No. Not yet, I guess. It's always possible.
Well, you're aware, being my co-artist, that dogs are very prominent in my repertoire.
Yes, I have noticed that.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Name me a song where a dog is.
Ah, we just played one today. 3 True Things. There's a dog in that one.
Oh, my dog nuzzles your neck.
Yeah.
See what else I can think. And scientific method, obviously.
Obviously, scientific method. I feel like I'm missing some.
Like your sheepdog at my feet. Oh, yeah. Oh, come on. What is the name of that song? Why does this feel so dangerous? Dr. Stevens will be happier. Shouldn't we be feeling free, trusting, strong, and loyal like this sheepdog at your feet?
Yeah.
In this light beside your pillow. Yeah,
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
All right, I'm winning 2-1. So, well, you have one dog named Jagger, right?
I do have a dog named Jagger, and I have a dog named Juliet as well.
Jagger and Juliet?
Yeah.
Who's going to get the first song?
I don't know. Either one.
They get along well?
Oh, yeah. They love each other.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, do you think dogs acquire the characteristics of their master?
Well, are Juliet and Jagger like you somehow?
Juliet is. Like, if I were a dog, I would be Juliet. If Juliet were a human, she would be me. No doubt about it.
How old was Juliet when you got her?
She was a puppy. She was 8 weeks.
And why was she called Juliet?
I don't know. I had named her before I even got her. I knew I was going to get a black female toy poodle, and I was going to name her Juliet. I love Juliet balconies. I don't know why.
What is Juliet balcony?
A Juliet balcony is like a miniature balcony. It's like you can't actually, it's like Romeo and Juliet.
You can't walk out on it, but you
Yeah,
can.
it's like you can just kind of lean a little bit.
Okay.
It's like pretending to be a balcony, but it's not really. So they call it a Juliet balcony. Like literally calling for Romeo. I'm pretty sure I could be totally wrong. I could have just made all of that up in my head. Anyway, so I love Juliet balconies, so I wanted to name the dog Juliet, and that's what I did.
And Jagger?
And Jagger's Jagger.
Was already Jagger when you got him?
Mm-hmm.
Where'd he come from?
A poodle breeder.
Oh, so they said you have Jagger.
Yeah, well, yeah, pretty much. Okay. So, the scientific method.
Yeah.
It's about politics, though.
Oh, is the scientific method? It is about politics. You're very astute. Golly, we were watching the news on her little TV. She said, "Can loving you reduce my misery?" Wow. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I was such a pain in the neck. An ambitious pain in the neck. And that whole acceptance ritual that is politics, I applied to Harvard, Yale, Dartmouth, Brown, Swarthmore. They were all delighted to have me. Got to Harvard, and there were 3 majors. You could major anything you want, but there are 3 majors you had to apply to get into. I applied to all 3. So that just shows you how the symbolism, the confusion for me, and how it was. And going into politics was inheriting my father's fantasy. He loved the Kennedys, Jack Kennedy, and one of the most basic instincts I've learned is to become a disciple to your parents, and that's sort of the first role model we have. Then as we grow older, to be independent, we pick a non-parent hero image. What we hear about so often is Joseph and Mary taking their kid to the festival, and the kid disappeared. A 12-year-old, 13-year-old kid disappeared, and they said, "Where did you go?" They were searching for him for 3 days. They couldn't find him. And he said, "I was on my father's business." So then that's him finding a new discipleship, that he, the 12-year-old or 12-year-old in the Bible, and the Bible's right about everything, right? He was going through a transformation of giving up his parent. Boy, Dr. Stevens is here in spades today. He was giving up his hero worship for his father, trading it for a different, quote, father, meaning in that sense, God is what they say, I was on my father's business. So there I was. That was the problem. There I was, a kid thinking I had to apply to everything, pretty obnoxious, no idea what I liked, I don't think. And one of my roommates was a guy who got pretty well known on TV later, named Michael Kinsley. And he says, "Hey, I hear you're interested in politics. Have you picked a district yet?" What? Picked a district? That was him pointing out to me how silly my fantasy was. I hadn't picked a district. I just knew I wanted to go into politics and save the world because my father wanted me to. Who? So that was a major moment of sort of self-truth. That wasn't the shadow self realizing that. That was sort of, the camp counselor was sort of realizing that too. And the truth in that, of course, is that trying to get emotional satisfaction from an external, like what, being president or being a congressman or something, wow, good luck. I mean, and I think on one level I realized that was a stark test of a smart person. I mean, you have to be too smart to realize if you want to go into politics, you have to pick a district. But that was like pointing out how silly my fantasy was. But then, being a doer, I was lucky enough to have a lover who said, "Oh, if you're interested in politics, let's move to Washington." That was a couple of years later. And I mean, as I mentioned before, that was like, you can do that? You can actually go to Washington? And I did that. And I used one of the professor's connections. I'll never forget, I was in his office and he called up the congressman and said, "Why haven't you hired Stevens? He's fantastic." And so I was hired as a legislative correspondent to write mail, to basically respond to mail that the congressman got. And I took the bus down early in the morning. I got there 2 hours early because they didn't know how long the bus was going to take. So I wasn't going to take any chances when I did that. And I was hired to replace somebody, and I didn't know it. Everybody in the office knew it except me. And she was extremely mean to me and extremely rude to me, and I didn't know why. And it was my first sort of 9-to-5 job, and I wanted to do well as a legislative correspondent on Capitol Hill for a congressman. And finally one day the AA is what they call him, the administrative assistant, pulled me aside and he said, look, he said, if you want to take your gloves off with so-and-so, that's okay with me. So he was sort of giving me a green light to answer her back, which I did. And it was 1976. Morris Udall was a congressman, very popular guy, and he was going to be one of the first, not first, but one of the recent congressmen to run for president. At that time, it was only senators for the most part and governors who would run for president. And so I, in the summer of 76, already admitted, I believe, to Georgetown Law School that I contacted the Udall campaign, and I used a technique that someone else had told me about. I waited all day to meet this guy. Well, I don't know if it was all day. It was a long time. And when I came in and sat down, I said, you don't know who you're keeping waiting, do you? Whoa, boy. That's a great way to make a friend, right? But anyway, the job I wanted was to volunteer anyway, so I ended up volunteering in Prince George's County for Morris Udall to try to build support for him. And already I had my plan that I was going to go into politics in Prince George's County because it was sort of a disorganized county, and I thought I could get elected somewhere and be an elected representative there and also be a lawyer in Washington, D.C. So I'd sort of be a super lawyer, unquote, in Washington, D.C. and be an actual candidate building my own career in Maryland. So then I entered law school, Georgetown Law School, and there was only one class that I took seriously, and that was about election law. And I was taught by a guy who had been the first general counsel to the Federal Election Commission, which was founded because of the excesses of Richard Nixon. And so I liked him and talked to him and was very interested in what he did. And I was getting the elevator one day and he said, Stevens, what are you planning to do this summer? I said, I have no idea. He said, I just recommended you to the vice president's office. So I call this number. So I called this number and the guy said, come see us on Friday. So I went straight to the Federal Election Commission and read every report I could of the Carter-Mondale Election Committee. Jimmy Carter had been elected president in 1976. I left out the fact that Udall didn't make it and Jimmy Carter came out of nowhere and won. He was a peanut farmer. And so he was the incumbent president by the time this law professor said this to me. So I read all the reports and trying to find out what I thought would be interesting things, so I'd look to this guy that I knew what I was talking about, and so I could find out what I was talking about. And to my amazement, he said, okay, you can be an intern, at least for a month anyway. And there I was in the old executive office building. I still remember how I felt walking up to the old executive office building. I used to call it a French wedding cake. They wanted to tear it down, and Jackie Kennedy wouldn't let them. And it's a beautiful, beautiful building, and it's right next to the White House. You look right down on it. There was a guy named Robert Strauss who was a super lawyer in Texas, and he was sort of like the utility guy for the Carter administration. He had like 6 jobs, and each of these jobs, or at least some of them, each had an office. So Robert Strauss, unbeknownst to him, I doubt if he ever saw it, had this corner office in the old executive office building. I was working out of a cubbyhole just down the hall, and I figured out pretty quickly that Strauss didn't even know we had this because he didn't have any furniture or anything like that. And so I sort of camped in there, and I would bring my dates. That was pre 9/11, so all I needed was a ID to walk anybody I wanted in. And on the 4th of July, I'd sit on the balcony, a real balcony, not a Juliet, and watch the fireworks and watch Amy Carter take her swimming lessons over the White House pool. And then something really great happened. A guy I had known through somebody named Jim Fallows was one of the president's speechwriters. Called Jim, he needs somebody to play tennis with. So I called him. I played tennis on the White House tennis court. Now, me being a tennis junkie and fan, wow. But all I could think of, he was pretty good. I had to think of, gosh, I got to make this interesting to him. So he beat me 6-4 or something. He says, oh, we have to do this again. Let's do it again next week. Okay, anytime. Are you kidding me? Quit the next day. He resigned the next day. Well, welcome to Washington. So they had a what do they call, field day, or a campaign day where all the employees would go on the White House lawn and have a party. And that's where I got the picture of me and Jimmy Carter, that is, and Muddy Waters. And that was I only met President Carter twice, never had a conversation with him. The other times when he came over to the campaign headquarters later on, and everybody shook hands and got a picture taken, which was nice. Jimmy Carter, don't forget me now. And I know I had gotten ready for that party, for that field day. That morning, I had smoked something before getting to work, and so I think I was particularly garrulous, and that's this, and what's the word I'm thinking for being friendly? So that's the origin of the picture with me with my arm around Rosalind Carter. She was the first lady, a lovely woman. But when I look at that picture now, and I see the 4 Secret Service guys just sort of in different positions, and I'm sure they're thinking, boy, oh boy, this guy, I don't know, they're not used to people walking out. I didn't hug her I hugged her from the side, but it's still like, So the vice president was Walter Mondale, and I don't know how this happened, but I ended up tutoring his son in math. And he passed it. And so that was, I would go to the White House, to the vice president's house, which is a naval observatory, and we would throw lacrosse balls with our sticks and then work on the math. So to become a politician in Maryland, I bought a house for like $28,000 or $30,000, a little old-fashioned house which was vintage, probably 1907, and apartment buildings had built up around it in the meantime. And so after a while I realized that I might as well try to rent it out, and so I did rent it out. I never really lived there in terms of commuting back and forth. And I had a Marine sergeant in there. And one day I went to pick up the rent with a young lady I was seeing at the time. I'll call her Ruby. And she was redhead. And so we go to see this guy. He was a heavy drinker, and he obviously didn't enjoy giving me the rent, but I wanted the rent, obviously. So we chat and we're friendly, and sure enough, I turn the subject to the rent, and I get the rent, a check, and we're walking out, and she says, "Don't let that happen again." He grabs a frying pan off his sink, smashes it on the counter. What was his name? God, I said, okay, hold on, it's okay. Okay, we're just, I hustled her. She's scared to death, a little late. And I'm hustling around, get her in the car, get in my Coronet, my Dodge Coronet, back it up the driveway, and drive up the street. And she was still shaking, and I was thinking, oh my goodness gracious. So, fast forward a little bit, Jimmy Carter finished his first term and was running for re-election in 1980. with the same vice president, Walter Mondale. And since I was an election law guy, I was one of the 8 people that went to set up the first headquarters for the committee to re-elect the president, Carter-Mondale Re-Election Committee. And we set up this office in this small building, and by that time I was in my 3rd year of law school, and I was thinking, good, boy, if Carter gets reelected, that's great. I can get a job in the new, working for the president somehow. Here I am. Here I am. And I thought that Carter, who was very smart, very wise, one of the things I liked a lot about Carter was when he was asked a question, he would analyze both sides, sort of like a good judge who will say, well, the plaintiff is arguing this, the defendant is arguing this, and sort of state the other position, each position in its most favorable light, or at least what it wants to be. And that's one of the things reason I like Carter, which is why I knew he would have no trouble, especially beating Ronald Reagan, who really didn't know what policy was. It didn't appear, and was just using color code words. Well, Reagan clobbered Carter, just clobbered Carter. But I'm jumping the gun again. Before that happened, I had my epiphany and realized I was going to go into politics, but I was going to do it where I was from, New York. That's where I was from. I hadn't been there since I was 14, and now I was 29 or 30, but that's where I was going to go. So I hustled up 8 interns and arrived in my hometown congressional district on the North Shore of Long Island, where Manhasset is, and included Great Neck, and introduced myself to the politicians locally, who I'm sure were just delighted to meet me, because I walk in, probably say I'm from the Presidential Re-Election Committee, trying to act a bit like a big shot. But I used that as a vehicle to meet the elected officials and the Democratic Party officials, and things like that. Then the election came. I was in New York at the time, and I was sitting in the New York Hilton, which is where the Carter campaign had its headquarters, and things are obviously not too happy because he got clobbered. And I was sitting this far away from 2 guys who were talking, and one guy said to the other, "Did you hear what happened to Wolf?" And I thought, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. My own hometown congressman, who was a Democrat, I realized as soon as he said that, had been swept out of office by Reagan's popularity, and there was now going to be a Republican congressman in my district. Well, what that means is that any loyal Democrat can say, I want to run. If you have a Democratic congressman, you're a Democrat. To fight within the own party to get it in a primary is extremely hard and extremely unheard of. It just hardly ever happens, especially back in those days. And in that moment, I had to talk about was that the camp counselor? Maybe it's the impulsor, but the impulsor went, and it was sort of like too big a realization even for me to realize, but I thought, hey, I can run for Congress. Which is what happened with enter my friend Joe. Joe told me 3 things in my life. Joe said 3 things that made huge differences in my life. And the first one was when I was talking to him with the benefit, probably in my Dodge Coronet, with the benefit of having rolled something and smoked something with Joe. And Joe uttered the famous phrase, "Do it." And that was very important for me. That was huge, because all of a sudden now, the kid who didn't have a district had a district. I never thought of it that way before, but finally Michael Kinsley had his answer, and not only did I have a district, but I had a well-positioned district, because every 10 years you redistrict, Congress redistricts. Which means each congressional district is supposed to represent the same number of people. Back then I can remember it being 435 or something thousand. Now I think it's 800,000 or something, because they still have only 437 districts. And every 10 years, by law, they would have to reapportion those districts so that one district doesn't have 800,000, the other has 300,000. And so that's obviously a big plum, and it's done by the state legislatures. So it didn't take me long to figure out that no established politician in that district was going to announce for the seat, especially a year and a half, 2 years early, because no one knew what the district was going to be, because it gets reapportioned. And that's one of the last things that the legislators fight over, is how to gerrymander it so their party can win or their party can't. So I realized, hey, it's a free country. Here I go. I'll announce, get all the publicity I can, and off I'm going, off I'm running. By this time, I had graduated from law school and had gotten a job working for a law firm, which was a political law firm. And I was called into the very political partner at the law firm was a guy named Boggs, and very nice guy. And he was the reason I got the job was because I was connected to the Carter campaign, not because of my law school grades. That's for sure. That's another topic. And Tommy Boggs called me in one day and said, "Did you take decedents' estates?" That means dead people. I said, I struggled with it. I hadn't taken it. I wasn't sure what it meant. He said, "Well, call this guy because this case might have some merit." I ended up representing the butler of a prominent journalist who, within a week period, changed his will from giving $900,000 to the butler to giving nothing or next to nothing to the butler, giving it all to his secretary, whom he married, and then shot himself. So this guy had committed suicide after rewriting his will, taking the butler out of it, putting his secretary, lovely lady, in there, and then shooting himself. Well, that's a whole other story in itself. But to make a long story short, I like to say that my first fee as a lawyer was $100, like it was a bad transmission case or something. And my second fee was $100,000. We settled this case with this guy for $300,000, and I had a contingency agreement which said I get a third. So I took that check for $100,000. I went into the local bank on Long Island in Manhasset and put it in the name of Stevens for Congress Committee. Drove to the headquarters of the local Democratic Party, who I had met those people before being with the interns, and showed them, threw a bank book over saying, look, because if they're much more interested in a candidate who's willing to spend the money to try to win. And remember now, the incumbent is a Republican. So it just takes a loyal Democrat to want to challenge the incumbent of the other party. Oh my goodness. So that was running around, getting my picture taken, trying to get people to know me, inviting the local committee people to receptions. It was at one of those receptions that my assistant campaign manager was dissing me, making fun of me. What my good friend of politics. Oh, everyone's my good friend. So I went to Capitol Hill and walked up to the guards, and I said, "Show me the Democrats." Well, there's so and so. Hey, I left out a part. I went to a fundraiser for our governor of New York. His name was Hugh Carey, in Georgetown, and a very nice lady, a doyenne of Georgetown. She had taken a liking to me, and she said, "Wait till he's had a few drinks." And so we walked up to him and says, "Governor Carey, here's Mr. Stevens. He wants to run in this district. Won't you co-host a fundraiser for him for me?" Sure. Within 10 days, I had gone to Capitol Hill, asked the guards who the Democratic congressman, walked up to them and said, "Hi, I'm going to run against the incumbent in this district, Republican. Obviously, I'm walking up to Democrats. Governor Hugh Carey is co-sponsoring a fundraiser for me. I'd be honored if I could add your name to the list of co-sponsors." Sure, 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 sure. I forget how many names I had, 178. And I printed all their names. I put the Honorable Hugh Carey, and then I had all their names. Invite you to a reception where? In Washington. And where did I send the invitation? To everybody who was anybody in the Democratic district. So now I showed them I had money. I showed them I had all this congressional support. The incumbent governor was co-hosting. I laugh about it now because I spent so many years strategizing about trials, and to strategize about this kind of image creating, wow. And it amazes me that oh my goodness, it amazes me that I did all that, and I'm still proud at the moves. Like, that invitation was quite a move, and so was the $100,000. It was quite a move. Meantime, the incumbent also was a Harvard grad, and he had said the American budget is like the Speaker of the House: big, fat, and out of control. Everybody loved the Speaker of the House. It was a guy named Tip O'Neill. And I'd gone in to see him. Had a reference to a guy named Chris Matthews, who's on TV now, and I must admit, one of my heroes. Very friendly guy. And, come on in, Speaker will see you now. So I got my picture taken with the Speaker. Next stop was to the son of the Speaker, who was a young lawyer in Washington, D.C. And I said, "I'm running against the guy who called your father big, fat, and out of control. I want you to come to the district for me at my announcement." He did it. So at my announcement, I had the son of the Speaker of the House, and everybody who it was impolite what they had said about this guy's father, So there was some punch in it. Big announcement. I filled the Great Neck Library, which is incredible, because as I found out later in life, I was sort of learning it then. No one goes anywhere. Nobody goes anywhere unless they have some reason. So to fill the Great Neck Library, incredible act. And the Speaker's son came up and introduced me, and I gave a fiery speech that I can beat the Boot. The guy's name was Le Boutelier, so they called him the Boot. Next morning, I couldn't wait. I drive down to the 5 and 10, and I opened the news, to grab the Newsday. That was the name of the paper on Long Island, still is. I pick up the phone, and I call the editor. I don't know what he's called, the political editor. Hi. I said, "I filled the Great Neck Library a year and 6 months before the election, and you don't even mention it?" "Well, people have been asking, saying that you've been misrepresenting your background in Washington." Well, I had been, because I said I said White House attorney. That was true. I wasn't admitted yet, but I was a graduate. You're an attorney after you graduate from law school. That was okay. Georgetown tennis champ. Now that was a credible lie. That also was true. There had been a summer, you could just see this, it works in a lot of places in the world, right? I mean, our dear leader, Donald Trump, hired people from casting to go to his announcement and look enthusiastic. Okay, so there was a summer tournament, singles, and I won it. And believe me, it was a very awful tournament. I was not I'm sure the best I could have done with any member of the Georgetown tennis team, 6-1, if I'm lucky, and Georgetown tennis team wasn't good. Now, I was not a good tennis player. So there it was, me, the chickens coming home to roost in a way, not telling the truth. And it's also like, why? you know? Why? And emotionally, it was like, why? So why did I do that? Well, because that's, well, why did I imply, because the other thing, why did I imply that, well, they were true. They were all truth facts, I was, but they weren't. And so anyway, I guess that was sort of like moment of truth. Like, what is this life that I'm doing where I'm just trying to get an impression? What's the purpose of that? I tell you this, it wasn't nearly as satisfying like when I think of my own life now, when I sometimes say, why am I working on music? Why am I working on these songs? To create them. To me, that circle completes itself. It's satisfying. I know what I'm doing. It is feeding me somehow, right in itself. This politics stuff wasn't, I was spending my own money. I spent maybe 35 or 40,000 of that, and I had, my bank account probably before I put that 100 in was 2,200 or something. I wasn't from money at all. I wasn't from money. I go, this labor leader, hey, my name's Stevens, I'm running for Congress. He goes, I'm Bertucci, I'm running from Congress. Oh.
So did they merge your past and your father's fantasy?
Did my past and my father's fantasy merge? Yes. Everything I just told you was my past and my father's fantasy merging. And boy, oh boy, I'm glad I did that. I'm so glad I did that. Also, by going back home, it was also pretty symbolic because I felt like uprooted when my parents got divorced, even though my mom remarried a man from the same town. So I still was staying in Manhasset when I would come home to see my mom sophomore, junior, and senior year in high school and in college too. Here I was back on Plandome Road, and at that point there still was the heart where I had written in the wet cement, DS and LB, Doug and Lori Burkett, That meant so much to me. And she was the girl that I had my first kiss, and they saved my first kiss for. Another thing I learned up there in terms of the merger was, my good friend, the lefty, I won't say his last name, Dean, and he's a friend. He still lived there, one of the few people who actually still lived there that I had any connection to, because I had gone away to boarding school in 10th grade. I'm running for Congress. Oh boy, yeah. Well, I want your help. Well, if I'm for you. And I thought, oh geez. Like if I called Lori now and say, let's have a cup of coffee. God, I hope she's okay. I'd have a cup of coffee with her. But wait a second, I called a friend assuming, hell yes, I'll help you any way I can. No, if I'm for you, because that's what politics is. It's like, wait a minute. I found one of my best friends if he's for me. Okay, what else do you do? Well, you're an aggressive candidate. This guy was cutting social services, and there was so whatever they call one of those political organizations, they were having a meeting, and of all places, it was in Manhasset High School, and they're meeting in the cafeteria. And the cafeteria, it must have been the junior high school cafeteria. I don't know, because it was definitely it was the same cafeteria where Linda Williams and I danced, having been elected senators of the Manhasset Junior High School in 9th grade.
Huh,
so
funny.
I had already been coronated. What do you get? Coronated? I think that's it. I had my crown put on. There I was with Linda. We had won. And in a sense, I think I've said this before, because I had already been elected president. I knew what it felt like. I had run a campaign. I probably had some. I don't know what I did for that one. Maybe I got all the principals to sign an invitation to a fundraiser. I don't know. But we had won. And it was in that same cafeteria that I arrived late after the meeting had already started with my hand out about attacking the boot for cutting social services. And I get there, I sit down, meeting was going on. Anybody have any questions for the congressman's assistant who had been giving a talk? Hi, yes. Stevens, I'm a candidate for Congress. If the congressman were here, which I see he's not, something like that, I would ask him these questions. So the MC said, well, Mr. Stevens, if you had been here on time, you would have known that the congressman is not well and his assistant was here today. So that went over like, it was just like the worst. It was much worse than I just described. Imagine it just like sticking my foot in it, unbelievably. So then I know enough to keep a poker face. I kept smiling at people hi and then got by the door as people were walking out. That was terrible what you did. I'm thinking, wait a minute. I'm spending my money to do something I don't really want to do. Even my friend Dean isn't mine. So that was it. That was the merger. Those were the high spots of working it through my system. The redistricting happened, fortunately, and Great Neck wasn't even in the seat. So, meantime, there were two other candidates who were much better than me. One of whom actually won. All
right, well, let's watch Star War at the bar door.
Let's watch Star War at the bar door.
On the 4th of July, I was feeling patriotic. So I bummed a nickel off an alcoholic. Mr. Ticket Seller, what can you do for me? Handed me a ticket for Washington, D.C. I got off the bus at a big white saloon. I walked up to the bar. Will the boss be back in soon? Yes, sir, he will. Have you rode hard today? Yes, I'm from America. Far, far, far away. The boss walked in with a flashlight in each hand. I said, give me your badge and the keys to this land. We won't sit and watch you smile while we die. Our sails are set and we're almost ready to fly.
Well, looking at that now, I realize that was about my congressional campaign. In a sense, you know, Potomac Fever, the following my father's dream, calling the bluff of my fantasies. You know, then when I went to Manhasset, a couple years later, there was nobody at all there who I knew. Everyone was gone. It was a dormitory town. But I was a new person now in Washington. You know, I didn't feel that, I didn't have that need, I didn't have that inherited need. I could be by myself. I guess that's why I wrote, "The anger I felt is now turned to trust. I ask no questions, I just do what I must. And the earth's last mystery leaves no tracks in the dust of those dead and dying I once loved." That isn't, I didn't want those people to die, but they were dead. And when I wrote this, I think my father probably was already dead. And the earth's last mystery leaves no tracks in the dust of those dead and dying I once loved. Well, I still loved him, but the tracks in the dust were gone. The earth's mystery was what am I going to do? I was free of my thirst for a savior figure. I was free of, I've described else, you know, how I met this guy in Ethiopia, talked about it elsewhere. And I was also free of my do-gooder guilt, which told me that it was wrong to try to make a living. There's an old saying that foolish politicians begin to believe their own press releases, you know? Which is sort of a relation to, ladies and gentlemen, here's a woman that needs no introduction, Jessica Fenton. Jessica Fenton gets up there and says, just because I didn't need an introduction doesn't mean I wouldn't have wanted one, you know? Or, thank you, Tom, for that beautiful introduction. That was an introduction that my father would have appreciated and my mother would have believed. You know, the mother would believe anything you say good about the child. So there I was 33 years old. I was no longer lugging around the unplayed dobro that was eventually stolen, which is what I'd lugged around in Europe. Not playing it, but it was symbolized to me, I guess, that artistic side of myself that I wanted to understand. And the book, some sociological book, the Origins of Totalitarianism, that's what it was. That was a book that I felt guilty that I hadn't read. It's like huge thing like that, really big. So now I had clear sailing. It was just me and my songs and my new profession of being a trial lawyer. I think I asked you this before, but was there anybody who you sort of yearned to be a disciple of? I guess Alanis, was she a disciple? How would you describe your relationship to her in your head?
Well, she was the one that, you know, opened the door to music. You know, if had it not been for that 1996 Grammy performance, I don't know if I would have gotten into music. So she, and her straightforward lyrics. I don't know. I don't know if I would call myself a disciple of her, but you know, I just thought she was cool. As an angry teenager. She was angry too. She wasn't that much older than me, in fact. When I look, you know, in retrospect, it's kind of funny.
And are there lines still that personify? One of the things about me, especially when I was high, they would, like the Dylan phrases would come, and I guess because like a poor fool in his prime, yes and no, you can hear me talk, but is your heart made out of stone, or is it lime, or is it just solid rock? And he would just ask these questions, and of course they came with the music, they came with the persona, and they came with the melody, I guess that's music. Melody is part of music, right? But the melody, so here's a guy that was like super sensitive to melody. I mean, yeah, they were my prayer book. It was my prayer book, and I was so lucky to have it.
Well, Alanis had this song about Catholicism on Jagged Little Pill.
Oh, really?
And I was raised Catholic. I'd never connected with it or understood it or bought into it, me personally. But here, was this album that was selling millions and millions and millions with a song about Catholicism. The first line is, "You know how us Catholic girls can be." Like, I just thought that was amazing as like a confused 14-year-old. Like, wow, okay, this artist is singing about this because that bothers me on a regular basis. And then she had a song called Perfect. Like, sometimes is never quite enough. That's the first line. So she was addressing real issues that I was, experiencing literally at the same time as an angry, teenager in Yucca Valley, California, the high desert. And high meaning everybody was high. I wasn't, but they were. So, I mean, I get it. The words come to you through the melody, and it just hits you, and that's, I guess kind of to answer your other question, why I became latched onto her. It's like, she gets it. She's cool.
I'm confused about the Yucca Valley and that community. That was sort of like a real cool artistic community.
I mean, it's the high desert. I mean, what else are you going to do in the desert except get high and create art?
But Dad was a Marine.
Yes, because 29 Palms is a Marine base, like 30 miles or something from Joshua Tree. And there's a super famous recording studio in Joshua Tree where people will go and retreat to Joshua Tree. And I mean, look at U2's album, Joshua Tree. I mean, there it is. It's a cool place. It's very artistic.
But Dad wasn't.
Well, Dad was on base. Dad was probably deployed. I don't even remember him being there.
Okay, he wasn't out there with his easel and his sandals and painting pictures of the. Okay.
No.
But
no.
it rubbed off on you, the other kids and the other families.
Yeah.
And when did you start playing the guitar?
I had started playing a few years before we moved there. In Rhode Island, Newport, the complete opposite of Yucca Valley.
And was it already something that was feeding you, playing the guitar, or was it something you were supposed to do and then at one point all of a sudden it started feeding you?
I had started playing guitar because I just had wanted to. Just from my mom's a guitarist, so we would go to Pickers Supply in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and I was very small, and I would just look up and be like, wow, I want to play guitar. So eventually I started playing, but I started playing on country music, Garth Brooks. So I played country for a while, and then Alanis came out, and then this whole other world opened up. So I was in Newport, Rhode Island, which is very prissy. It's great. I love it. Going from this like uptight New England place to super laid back, super high, let's go get some tacos, Yucca Valley, California. So country music to Alanis Morissette singing about Catholicism. I loved it, the transition.
And Yucca Valley was, what, age 12 to 15?
14 and 15. Yeah, 14 and 15.
And then for your sophomore year, you were plunked down in
Virginia.
Stafford, Virginia.
Yes. Yeah.
To start your junior year or start your sophomore year?
Sophomore. So I actually did 3 years in Virginia.
And you cried?
I hated every second of it, yeah. Definitely.
And the first person that made a difference or helped in that environment was?
In my Stafford years, well, my bandmate. I played in a band. I started a band in junior year, and it was with another girl, and she was amazing, and then that just changed everything. I was like, oh, I'm a musician. This is cool. And we were great. We did very well. And that was the start of my musical path.